Hey football fans, and welcome to the Coordinator Project. In this video we're looking at Steve Sarkisian, who was Alabama's offensive coordinator in 2020 but will be the head coach at Texas in 2021. Throughout the offseason I'll be hitting coordinators from all over the country though, so be sure to subscribe to the channel and ring the bell to get notified whenever a new breakdown posts. Let's get into Sarkisian's offense by taking a look at where it came from. When you look back at his formative years as an offensive coach, the first thing that stands out is his truly meteoric rise. In 1999, he was playing quarterback in the CFL, and within 2 years, he was leading a USC quarterback room that had guys like Carson Palmer, Matt Leinart, and Matt Castle in it. So how does a 3-year CFL quarterback get his hands on 2 future Heisman winners just 2 years into his coaching career? The answer to that question goes through Norm Chow and through the BYU School of Offense more generally. Sarkisian played for Chow at BYU in 1995 and 96, where he led the nation in passing efficiency as a senior and broke the school completion percentage record set by Steve Young more than a decade earlier. When Chow got hired as USC's offensive coordinator in 2001 then, he gave his former star quarterback his first big break, bringing him on as the Trojans quarterback coach, and to this day Sarkisian says that he's still running some of the same concepts that he coached for Palmer and Leinart back in the early 2000s. The development of that BYU offense is absolutely fascinating, and talking a little bit about it gives us a nice window into the earliest layers of Sarkisian's passing game. In the time that Norm Chow was an assistant at BYU, he participated in the rise of a tremendously influential school of offense pioneered by Doug Scovil, who was hired as the Cougars' offensive coordinator in 1976. Leading up to that year, BYU had been a pretty mediocre WAC team, and head coach LaVell Edwards was sick of running a conventional ground-based attack that couldn't seem to beat more talented teams. When Edwards hired Scovil in 1976, he specifically wanted to reinvent the offense to bring it in line with some of the more progressive developments that were happening with the pro passing game. More specifically, he wanted an offense that could control the ball with the pass and force the defense to defend the entire field, especially from sideline to sideline. It was Scovil's job then to develop this offense, and he did it by taking inspiration from a then veteran NFL coach and passing game innovator named Sid Gilman. What Gilman realized is that if the defense is playing a zone coverage where defenders are responsible for areas instead of receivers, then it's possible to use multiple receivers to stretch those zones and force the defense to cover more guys than they actually can. This seems obvious, and at this point it's become a big part of every kind of passing game, but at the time it revolutionized offensive football. Scovil's BYU offenses took this concept and ran with it, specializing specifically in what they called oblique stretches, which worked to create 3-on-2 triangles at weak spots in the coverage. We can get an idea for how these stretches work on this play from Alabama's game against Georgia. Up here at the top of the screen, Alabama has a split-out running back and 2 tight ends, giving them 3 receiving threats to the left side of the formation. On the defensive side, however, we see that Georgia only has 2 potential coverage defenders outside toward the perimeter, and so that's the part of the field where Alabama will be able to get good numbers. To do this, the running back's going to get rid of one of those 2 defenders by going vertical. This will make him the top point of a 3-receiver triangle. On this play, the cornerback's going to run deep with that vertical threat, and that's going to leave just this outside linebacker on the edge. Alabama's then going to put a stretch on him by running to the flat with their wing tight end, and then running an out with their inline tight end, forming the 2 bottom points of that triangle. The quarterback isn't going to target this stretch on this play because Georgia's running a blitz and that triggers a hot read, but if we pause the play right here, we can see that the flat route has pulled the outside linebacker wide, and that this has opened up space for the out route to the inside. If the outside linebacker would have instead sat on that out, then he wouldn't have been able to cover the flat. And so this means that that guy really can't be right no matter what he does. This is exactly the kind of thing that you would have seen from the BYU offense starting in the late 70s and early 80s when they were pumping out first-round draft picks like Mark Wilson, Jim McMahon, and Steve Young, as well as Heisman Trophy winner Ty Detmer. The ultimate goal of that BYU system was to control the ball with a short, simplified passing game. That's the earliest layer of Sarkisian's offense, but it's definitely not the only or even the dominant one, and this brings us to another layer which came from Sarkisian's year with the Raiders, coaching quarterbacks under offensive coordinator Norv Turner. Well, the BYU offense was predicated around controlling the ball with the pass, keeping things simple, and taking whatever the defense gave them. Turner belonged to a more vertically oriented school of offense known as the Air Coryell system, and Sarkisian specifically credits Turner for some of his play-action concepts. I don't know if he got the specific play that we're about to see from Turner, but this is definitely the kind of play-action concept that you'd see in that offense with at least one important twist. The twist here, which definitely wouldn't have been around with the Raiders in 2004, is the backfield set, where Alabama's put their quarterback and running back in the pistol, with the quarterback in the shotgun and the running back directly behind him. We can see the reason for this if we run it forward just a bit. When the running back lines up behind the quarterback like this, it lets the offense create the same kind of back to the defense play fake that you would otherwise normally get with your quarterback under center. Sarkisian will put his quarterback under center in short yardage situations, but for the most part in 2020, he got this kind of hard play action fake out of the pistol. As for the passing concept, it's pretty simple. Alabama's lining up with their wide receivers in a stacked alignment, and Florida's playing cover 2 over the stack, so the cornerback here will defend any outside route, the slot defender will take any inside route, and the safety will play as a deep half defender over the top to take anything vertical. To attack this coverage, the receiver on the ball is going to run a dig over the middle. As we've just seen, the slot defender will be responsible for taking away this inside breaking route, and so the dig's going to keep him occupied. The receiver off the ball is then going to run a post, which will attack the middle of the field behind that slot defender. This is a great route against this coverage because it's going to break away from that cornerback who's sitting outside, and it's going to break underneath of the safety who's playing over the top. From here, this becomes a very simple read for the quarterback. All that he has to do is key that slot defender. If that guy sits on the dig as he does right here, then you just throw the post behind him. If that guy would have instead dropped to take away the post, then you come back to the dig underneath of him. This kind of play shows us a second important layer to Sarkisian's offense. There are no triangles here, and there aren't a bunch of receivers out in the pattern trying to force the defense to defend from sideline to sideline. This is just a downfield, 2-on-1 play action stretch on the slot defender. With the last 2 plays, I've talked about mentors that Sarkisian's coached under, but at this point in his career, he's been a play caller for 14 years, and his offense has developed in important ways over that time. In fact, the new features that he's added since then, even more than his early offensive influences, make up the bulk of his system today and help us define his offensive philosophy. So now, let's focus on defining what Steve Sarkisian's Alabama offense actually was in 2020. The first thing to know about this offense is that it's really built around an aggressive downfield passing attack with a lot of work getting done in the 10 to 20 yard range with run after the catch potential. While Sarkisian's play calling was balanced in 2020 and even skewed toward the run game, his passing game finished 3rd in the country in yards per game, while his run game finished just 47th. So while the play calling may have been balanced, the passing game was a lot more effective. Alabama obviously had talent at every level of the offense, and so some of this is coming from scheme. Sarkisian's offense has a lot of interesting ideas in the passing game, but the run game is more straightforward, at least by 2020 standards. On this play, let's take a look at a passing play that represents Sarkisian's offense to me. Here, Alabama's in a tight bunch set with 3 receiving threats compressed to the left side of the formation. The concept that Sarkisian's called here is absolutely fantastic against the coverage that Georgia's running. There's a lot that we could get into about Georgia's coverage rules here, but to keep it simple, let's just say that everything is going to come down to this weak side safety. The quick version of his job is that with 3 receiving threats lined up away from him and just 1 receiver lined up to his side, he needs to check for one of those strong side threats to attack back across the formation toward him on a crossing route. This is why, after the snap, we see that he's cocked toward that side of the field, looking for a receiver to potentially add into his side of the formation. The important thing here is that he doesn't get that threat, at least not initially. He sees that the number 1 receiver stemming to the outside and away from him, the middle receiver's going vertical, and the tight end staying in to block. He's not threatened by a crossing route, and so that tells him to look for his second job, which is to work with the cornerback to his side to create a bracket on the only receiver there. On this play, that receiver's running a curl, and so that safety is going to nail down on him. If we pause the play right here, we see that that wide receiver is double covered with the safety to the inside and the cornerback on the outside, so the coverage rules to this side have worked out pretty well. The problem, though, is that Sark is bringing a crossing route over, it's just coming late. To understand what's happening here, let's look back to the strong side of the formation. This is the side with a bunch of receivers, and Georgia's chosen to defend them with a 4-on-3 structure. Again, to simplify the coverage rules, Georgia has a cornerback and a safety to take any 2 receivers vertical. They've then got a nickelback to defend the curl and flat zones underneath of them, and then a linebacker defending anything coming back to the inside. This play is going to depend on Alabama's wide receiver being a better athlete than that linebacker. After the snap, we see that that receiver is going to push vertical. It's the linebacker's job then to wall him off from the middle of the field and to force him outside, where Georgia has that cornerback and safety that I mentioned earlier. The problem here is that this is an athletic mismatch for that linebacker. If we run this forward just a bit more, we see that that wide receiver has been able to get a step on him, climbing over the top and getting back into the middle of the field. Now that we understand Georgia's coverage rules a little bit, we can see why this is a huge problem. If we pause the play right here, we can remember that against this route combination, Georgia's weak safety is responsible for nailing down on the curl by this receiver right here, creating that inside-outside bracket with the cornerback. When he sits on this route, though, it opens up space behind him, and what's effectively happened here is that Sarkisian's been able to isolate the crossing receiver on a linebacker in a clear athletic mismatch with no safety help over the top. On this play, the quarterback happens to throw the ball a little too short into the inside, but we can imagine that if he'd hit his receiver in stride, maybe right about here, then not only would this have been a nice reception, but there'd also be a lot of room for him to run after the catch. This is the kind of thing that really stood out to me about Sarkisian's 2020 offense. Another feature of this offense is that it relied a lot on motion and shifting, with some kind of pre-snap action happening on well over half of its plays. Sarkisian's offenses use a lot of 1 and 2 tight end sets, and those tight ends play a big role in all of that motion and shifting. On this play, for example, Alabama wants to run toward the right to the wide side of the field. They've got a problem, though. They've started out in a 2x2 spread formation, and so they only have their 5 offensive linemen in the box as blockers. Meanwhile, on the other side of the ball, Georgia has 6 defenders. To solve this problem, Sark's going to use motion by this tight end, who started the play split out wide. Before the snap, he's going to bring him into the box, making him a 6th blocker to match the defense's 6 defenders. After the snap, that guy's going to lead up to the backside linebacker, cutting him off from the right side of the formation and allowing this run to get to the play side. As we can see right here, without that tight end's block, this backside linebacker would have easily been able to make the play, and so motioning that guy into the box is really the thing that makes this play work. Of course, it's often easy to oversimplify this kind of thing. Obviously, motioning in an extra blocker will let you take out 1 extra defender. Defenses aren't stupid though, so they're going to have responses of their own to this kind of motion. If we look at the pre-snap movement one more time, we see that when Alabama motions this tight end into the box, this safety is going to move into the box to match him, so Alabama technically hasn't solved anything. Before the motion, they were down 5 on 6, and now they're down 6 on 7. There is something here that's more favorable to the offense after the motion happens, though. When we look at the alignment of that safety that's worked into the box, we see that he's playing really loose, much looser than that linebacker that the tight end's going to block. On this play, Alabama's running away from that safety, and so even though he is quote-unquote in the box, he's not going to be able to make an impact on this play. The real question then is, why is his alignment so loose? And the answer to that question lets us get into one of the most publicly discussed aspects of Steve Sarkisian's Alabama offense, the RPO, or run-pass option game. To see how this works, let's watch this play one more time, but let's ignore the motion tight end and the running back and instead focus on Heisman Trophy winner Devontae Smith here on the backside of the run. After the snap, he's going to run a slant, and if we pause the play right here, we can see why the safety's playing with that loose alignment. By sitting outside and not attacking the line of scrimmage, he's putting himself in position to cut that slant if the quarterback happens to throw it. What this does, though, is makes him late to the run that's working away from him. In this frame right here, we can see that he's still outside the hash after the ball's handed off. If we run the play forward a little more, we see that he's now started to pursue, and that if he were a little bit earlier to the run, then he might have been able to hold this to a 4 to 6 yard gain. The problem with that, though, is that on these RPO plays, Alabama's quarterback is reading that specific player. If we pause the play right here, we can see that he's got eyes on him. The quarterback only hands off on this play because he knows that the safety's slow playing the run, but what would happen if the safety aggressively chased the run instead? This play from the Florida game gives a great example. Once again, on this play, we see that Alabama has a tight end in the box, giving them 6 blockers. Florida has 6 immediate box defenders, and then the backside safety here is potentially a 7th defender that they can't block. On this play, unlike the last one, that safety is going to step down into the box and work toward the line of scrimmage. Now, remember that on these run-pass option plays, the quarterback is reading that safety, and here we again see that he's got eyes on him as he's meshing with the running back. When the quarterback sees that safety working downhill, he knows that he won't be able to cut the slant, which again is coming from Devontae Smith on the backside of this play. Because that safety is working downhill, the quarterback pulls the ball and throws it, picking up a nice gain. People often associate RPOs like this with spread offenses, but really at this point they've become a staple at every level of football, and Sarkisian's offense shows a largely pro-style approach to them. In his offense, the RPO is a tool, not a primary mode of attack, and at least some of that comes from his desire to have an effective play-action passing game. Earlier in the video, for example, we saw Alabama using a pistol alignment to create a true back-to-the-defense play fake. That only works, though, if you actually hand off to the running back on some of these plays. On this play, we'll see an actual handoff from the pistol with no option to pass. After the snap, the quarterback turns his back to the defense, but this time it's just a straight handoff. There's no pass option on this play, and in fact, there couldn't be, because obviously when the quarterback has his back to the defense, it's impossible for him to read a safety or a linebacker. Sarkisian needs plays like this to set up his play-action passing game, though, and so the RPO really can't be the engine that drives his offense as it is with more spread-oriented teams. Instead, it's just one of several different tools that he has for keeping the defense from loading up the box, and that's much more in line with current pro-style approaches to the RPO. At its core, then, Sarkisian's offense is a pro-style one-back offense that makes frequent use of 1 and 2 tight end sets. His play calling aims for run-pass balance, but his 2020 offense was fundamentally oriented around the downfield passing game, which was especially good at attacking the 10 to 20 yard range with run-after-the-catch potential. At the same time, it does fold in a few elements of the modern RPO game, although that ultimately doesn't take it too far from its pro-style roots. Alright, that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it, you might consider hitting the thumbs up button down below to like it. The more likes, the more YouTube will recommend these videos to other people, so it really helps to support the channel. Also, if there's a coordinator that you want to see on here, let me know in the comments and I'll see what I can do. Otherwise, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell to get notified whenever a new breakdown goes up, and I'll see you here next time.